Special build-up continues for the United States presidential elections. Yes, the U.S., celebrated as one of the oldest democracies in the world, is gearing up for a pivotal election on the 5th of November 2024. This election is brimming with key narratives that promise to make it one of the most anticipated in recent history. Among some noteworthy events leading up to this are an assassination attempt on former President Trump, President Biden's unexpected withdrawal from the race, and candidates offering cash prizes to entice registered voters. With polls indicating a very tight race across every state, each state and demography presents its own unique dynamics and a close competition. This year, approximately 240 million US citizens are eligible to vote. However, the winner will not be determined by the popular vote, but through the Electoral College. To win the presidency, a candidate must secure a majority of the 538 Electoral College votes distributed amongst the 50 states, specifically 270 votes. Amongst these, 7 swing states are believed to hold the keys to the White House. These battleground states are characterized by their unpredictable voting patterns, of often switching between Democratic and Republican candidates. These states often have a mix of demographic groups, varied economic interests, and differing cultural attitudes, leading to fluctuating voter preferences from one election to the next. On that note, let's take a quick look at which states are Democratic and Republican strongholds and which are still undecided, which perhaps could end up determining the outcome of these presidential polls. Let's quickly show you what's, of course, the scenario in the 50 states of the United States of America right now. Well, this is what things are looking like right now. And, of course, this is according to a CNN survey. So, Harris currently stands at 226 according to them. She needs 44 more to clinch of course, the victory in the elections. Donald Trump currently stands at 219 according to them. He needs 51 more votes to, of course, clinch the 270 figure which is needed to win the presidential polls. And this is what the things look like in the United States. Can we please go back to the previous slide? Let's just go back to the previous slide for a second and show you the reds are strong Republican states. So these are the Republican strongholds. These are likely to go in favor of course, the Republican camp according to the CNN survey. The blue, the dark blue, are all Democratic strongholds expected to add up in Harris's kitty. The ones which of course are light red are Republican leaning, but not completely stronghold. So that, of course, includes Florida over here. You can see the ones which are light blue, like, of course, these ones over here, New Mexico, also Colorado, also Oregon. These are, of course, states which are Democratic leaning, but not strongholds. And the ones which, of course, are yellow, as you can see on the map. Now, these are the swing states. These are the states which could determine who will win the presidency. So including Nevada, Arizona, and of course Michigan over here, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Wisconsin. These are all those states which could hold the keys for the White House. Let's quickly go across to the next slide if we can. Let's give some more information to our viewers. Now, these, of course, are those strong Republican states that I was just telling you about. Of course, these are states including Texas. These are states which, of course, include many other, of course, states like Ohio over here. Also, of course, Utah on the western side. So these, of course, are the strong Republican strongholds. Alaska as well. And Donald Trump, of course, expected to pick up all those strongholds very, very easily. The ones which lean towards the Republicans are, of course, also marked over here. Those are also likely to go to Donald Trump's kitty, but they're, of course, leaning ones, not complete strongholds. So we'll have to, of course, wait and watch, but they're very likely to go to Donald Trump's kitty. Let's also show you now about the Democratic strongholds. So these are the solid Democratic states, of course, California there, New York over here, Illinois, of course, in the center. These are all going to be going to Harris's kitty. And then you have some Democratic leaning states as well. Let's go to the next slide and show those Democratic leaning states for our viewers. There you have it. Of course, these are Democratic leading states: Oregon, Minnesota, Virginia, These are all likely to also go to Harris's kitty, but these, of course, remember, are Democratic-leaning ones, not complete Democratic strongholds. So we're going to have to wait and watch how the voting pans out. And these are the toss-up ones. These are 93 electoral votes. Will they go to the Harris camp, or will they go to the Trump camp? That is what will determine which way this presidential election is going to head. And these, of course, includes, as I said earlier, those very, very crucial states of Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. These are, of course, the swing states, as they're called, the toss-up votes. Who will they go to? Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? Well, that's the million-dollar question. Let's discuss. Let's quickly expand this up with our panelists who are joining us live as well for their perspective on this big story. We have with us Ashok Sajanhar, former diplomat, live with us. We have Joyita Basu, editor of the Sunday Guardian, live in our studio with us. Charles Thompson, senior journalist, joins us live. Ben Aris, editor-in-chief, BNE, is also with us. He's also been former bureau chief in Moscow for the Daily Telegraph. Keith Vaz is also joining us live. He's former Minister of State in the United Kingdom for Europe and North America. Dr. Satoru Nagao, fellow Hudson Institute, is also joining us live today. Welcome all of you, and thank you for being with us on our special NewsX coverage as we build up to the US presidential election, which of course is going to be held tomorrow. Ambassador Sajanar, let me get you in here first. So the numbers, of course, right now too tight to call. CNN survey giving slight edge to Kamala Harris, but it's going to be, of course, the swing states which hold the key to the White House, isn't it, Ambassador Sajanar? And right now, no one really able to figure out which way they're going to go.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your show. And you are absolutely right. I think you mentioned that Kamala Harris is, as far as the blue states and the blue-leaning states are 226 electoral college votes that come to her, and Donald Trump is 219. That is the red or the Republican-leaning states. So that gives her 219. So both of them, there are 93 of them in these 7 battleground states. And that is what is going to decide. And even in these states, Uday, it is said that, it's not going to be more than possibly 100,000 votes that are going to determine the final result. So it is going to be very, very close. In all these states, even the voting systems are quite different. They differ from county to county in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is, of course, the biggest prize and the biggest catch for any of the candidates. It has 19 electoral college votes. And then we see basically, as far as the issues that are concerned, they all play out in these 7 battleground states. If you look at the issue of jobs, at the issue of economy, at the issue of employment, I think that is an issue because many of these states are also the Rust Belt, the Midwestern states where it is seen that the jobs have traveled out of the country, and that is what Donald Trump has been saying, that he's going to impose tariffs and he's going to get these jobs back and manufacturing back to India. And also, of course, one of the other issues, gender has taken center stage, and the rights of women, particularly as far as the overturning of the Roe versus Wade act that was there, and the women are demanding that they have right over their body, control over their body, so the abortion rights need to be provided to them. So there are a number of issues which divide the two sides, and as you said, it's too close to call. So we'll really have to wait and see as to how things pan out. But one particular aspect I could mention before I turn the floor back to you is that about 75 million voters have already voted in the early voting. And it appears that more women have voted in this early voting than it is men. And it is expected that as far as the women are concerned, because gender has assumed such center stage in these elections, that the women will by and large be voting for Kamala Harris. So at least that element seems to be in her favor. but then it is a toss-up because any of the leads being given in any of the battleground states, they are well within the margin of error as far as all these polls are concerned. And the last point possibly is, that yesterday we had a poll from the CNN from Iowa coming out and giving Kamala Harris a 3% lead. Now, that has been a Republican state, that has been a red state all through. So this really, puts the whole thing under a question mark, whether, some of these red leaning or the blue leaning are the states, are they going to, be as they have vote as they have voted in the past. So as I said, everything really up in the air till 6th of November, when we'll
Yes.
start getting some results, some clarity on this.
Absolutely. Joyita, come in here. What could be the X factor, according to you, in the swing states, which could end up determining which way they'll go, Kamala Harris's way or Donald Trump's way, which could, of course, give them the edge for the White House?
Well, when you're looking at the swing states, I think primarily, of course, the women factor is very important. And as Ambassador Sajjanhar mentioned, the women, there is a perception growing that women largely are going to vote for Kamala Harris, which in fact there has the one ad that came out from the Harris camp, which it is now being panned very badly, where it says that, two women, they look at each other and say, we are telling our husbands something else and we are voting Kamala Harris, So, the instruction to women is that do not listen to your husbands. If they are voting Trump, you vote Harris. So there is a lot of controversies being generated because of that. But I think the women factor.
I think Julia Roberts is in one of the ads.
Yes, Julia Roberts is there. So the thing is, you see, so that is one factor. But let's not forget one thing about Trump. Just like, let's put it this way, there is always a section of voters who will not publicly admit that they are voting Trump. Because you see, as it has happened in this country also, voting for a particular party, voting for the right is considered not exactly, very, it's not considered polite. So, people don't talk about it, people don't mention it. But what happens, there is a 3 or 4% bump that comes from basically people who are not going to say, they are going to say, no, we are independent, and then ultimately they will go and vote Donald Trump. Now, when it comes to the polling numbers that are coming from the USA, it is very confusing. I know this is a poll that Ambassador Sajjanhar talked about. It was a poll by Ann Selzer. It came out from Iowa, says that she is leading in Iowa, which is a conservative quote unquote bastion, if we can use the word, and it's primarily because of the women vote. But at the simultaneously, there are several other polls and I would say pretty, you can trust those polls also, because they have got particularly the 2016 election, right, where everybody was giving a sweep to Hillary Clinton, but Trump won. Now, they are saying something else altogether. So, when you are, it's becoming a case like what happens in India sometimes, whichever party, whichever side wants to look at a poll and feel satisfied, all the polls are there. So, some poll is showing Harris ahead, some poll is showing Trump ahead, some polls are showing Trump is sweeping, the rest, some of them are showing it's neck and neck. So, frankly, forget about the polls, not one of them matters. What matters is what happens in the elections. But frankly, if you ask me, the way we saw the polling happen in 2020, two things I am going to mention here, and I am certain if there are American audiences here or any of the panelists, they are not going to like it. But number one, there is a very strong perception among very, I would say, sane Republican voters or Trump supporters, that there is a possibility of huge rigging. Okay? And that is because rigging in terms of you don't even need an ID. In places like California and all, I was seeing all those things. So, you don't even need an ID. So, the illegal immigrants can come and vote as well. So, there is a huge question mark there, and they are talking about the system is rigged in a manner that only the Democratic Party will come. So, when you are looking at that, so they have this huge fear, I would say, that and then secondly, states like say Arizona and all, Arizona in particular, they have said that it will take us 2 weeks to count the ballot.
Yes.
So, you see what happens is that this frankly, and especially for us sitting in India, who are used to such an it's long drawn out, of course, but we are used to such an efficient election system where even one vote being counted this side and that side is a problem. This seems bizarre. I was watching one, if I can just mention quick point. I was watching one CNN clip where this lady is arguing, the anchor is arguing with Vivek Ramaswamy. So what, there was a mismatch of 109 or 110 votes. It did not, because of the illegal immigrants, it did not impact the result. Think of something like this happening in India. I mean, the whole election will be shut down if there is a mismatch of 110 votes.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is crazy. What sort of democratic, credentials does America have? Frankly, if you ask me, that is the big message that comes out to me, that people are afraid that there is rigging going to happen. There is no accountability. States can do whatever. Frankly, it's a big mess.
And then the US likes to lecture others
exactly.
on
that is the irritating point.
On democracy and, of course, human rights and other issues. Okay, let me get in Charles Thompson as well. Charles Thompson, now, Joyita, of course, made an interesting point about the silent voters. Now, in India too, you do have the silent voters in many parts of the country, in state elections and in national elections. Often, they're the ones who defy exit polls predictions. And we have seen a lot of silent voters in India end up backing the BJP, which has led to, victories for them. Now, do you believe there are those silent voters in the United States? There are the silent voters, particularly in the swing states, but also in other, the leaning states that we were talking about in our electoral map. And which way are those silent voters going to go, Charles Thompson, in your hunch?
I actually see it quite differently. And I've been observing the American polls, the election for quite a couple of months. And I'm seeing the same thing happening in Australia, and I'm seeing the same thing happening in India. So let's focus on the American election. If we look at the legacy mainstream media, for the last few months, I've been watching it, and hands down, Kamala Harris is going to win. If we're looking at social media and the influencers, the Republicans, and Donald Trump's going to win. And it's been fascinating to see how both of these have such different opinions. But now, of course, we've got to the point where the pollsters actually have to give out polls. And I won't name the pollster, but one of the top pollsters, what they've done, which I thought was fascinating, instead of announcing one result, they've given 3 results. So in one result, Kamala Harris wins, and in 2 other results, Trump wins. So it's not so much the silent voter, but it's the way people are now participating, because there is so many other ways to get information on the news. And of course, the other big thing which hasn't come in the mainstream media is now, just like in Australia, smaller minority groups are now standing up and switching their vote. So at the moment, you'll see on social media, a lot of Muslim Americans are now standing up to the shock of the left of America and saying, we support Trump.
Okay. So, patterns are changing, are shifting, is what you're saying. Let me get in Ben Harris as well for his perspective before I go across to Keith Vaz and Dr. Nagao as well. Ben, let me quickly draw you in here on, what you believe could end up, being the issues or the factors that would clinch the election either for Harris or for Trump. It's gone down to the wire. It's going down to the wire as we speak. But what do you believe those issues could be, or factors which could end up determining who's victor in this close race?
Well, if I can pick up on a point that Charles just made, and your studio guest as well, that the issues are actually not the issue. That the media and the way people are participating in this election, traditionally it's been through the media that you give your policies, and then the media chews it over and says this is a good idea, this is a bad idea, and gives you the pros and cons. But the new factor in this is twofold. One is social media. And social media is a totally different beast to the mainstream media. Mainstream media, us as journalists, we're held to an ethics where we have to tell the truth and have to provide evidence and quotes and blah, blah, blah. Social media, you can say what you like. And the whole Trump phenomenon, what he's done is very successfully how can I say it, defanged or depowered the mainstream media because he comes out with this bombastic statements. And in the old days, he used to say something bombastic, a lie. And then you'd be debunked and shamed and you'd be out of the race. The problem with Trump is that he's changed the whole mindset. He's changed the whole modus operandi because he comes out with a lie, a huge one. The whole media jumps on it. But then within 24 hours, within the same cycle, he comes out with a new lie. And the trouble is, the media is always left catching up because normally we'd have like several days and you'd chew this over and you'd make a mockery of him and make him a fool. But because his lies come so fast, that there's no time to debunk the previous one before he moves on to the next one. And so the public is left trailing and all this stuff, mud sticks. And what Trump has done is he's played to an audience where a lot of people, he just says things that people want to hear, build that wall. He said, I think last week, that on the first day he's going to be in office, he's going to end the war in Ukraine. Another thing he said, on the first day in office, he's going to deport 21 million illegal migrants, which is all like, classic xenophobic, populistic statements. And it's all rubbish. It can't be done. It's not possible to do it in that space. As for ending the war in Ukraine, I'm not sure that can be done. He can cut off the funding, perhaps. But the media is left scrambling. And the second thing he's done is to undermine trust in the media and the reporting, so that even when he was on that in the debate with Harris, he famously said that immigrants are eating cats and dogs. And in the debate, during the debate, that was live fact checked by ringing the governor, I forget which state it was, who denied it. And they said in the debate, sir, that's not true. We just checked and it's not true. But the point being is, as he's undermined the press, then he can sell that as an attack on him by the mainstream media. And his whole base believes that, which means you can't debunk him anymore. And they're locked into supporting him. And the more you attack him, the more you show him to be a fool, then the more support or the stronger his existing support is. And as your studio guest said, that personally, I take this as America's democracy is in deep trouble. Because if you remove the fourth estate, if you remove the rational debate, if you make elections not about policy, about what people are actually going to do to make your lives better, and simply about this bombastic attacks on each other, where you take power on the basis of, a cacophony of lies, then when he comes into power, I don't know. We've seen already. He's been in power once. That he's totally unqualified to do it. He has very nasty, xenophobic, narcissistic, all sorts of problems that have been identified, and normally that would disqualify him. But the nature of this election, the way things have changed, have unfortunately meant that he stands a very good chance of winning.
Yes.
So if you come specifically to your question, what policies, what issues are going to bring him down? I think that's the wrong question to ask. It's just, is he going to say something so crazy that he's going to alienate?
So you're saying that unfortunately this is, and that's not a good sign, as you're saying, that this is an election which is bereft of issues, which is bereft of credible voter concerns and voting issues that have been part of the rhetoric. But it's been an election on, of course, personality.
And it polarizes the voting public in a very dangerous way.
Yes.
And this is going to be the big take-home.
Okay, Keith Vaz, come in here. Because in the United Kingdom, recently you also had, of course, an election, but that was an election where one knew which way the country is going to vote, and that's exactly what happened. It was, of course, a huge surge for Labour and, of course, a huge surge away from the Conservatives. However, of course, it's gone down to the wire in the US. What is your hunch, Keith Vaz? Which way is the wind blowing in the United States of America? And as far as the UK is concerned, what is the UK thinking of this election? Who would be a better friend for the United Kingdom?
Well, first of all, let me say how much I agree with your previous commentators. This is a fascinating election, but American elections are always like this. You always have these two huge personalities, and people are fascinated by what they say and what they do. But what an incredible system. Can you imagine? They haven't modernized their system, even though this is we're going to elect the leader of the free world, the most powerful man or woman in the world. It's still the old electoral college system instead of first past the post or the winner wins because they've got the biggest percentage. So at some stage, I think you're going to have to look at this system. But it keeps us interested. Of course, it keeps the whole election on a knife edge until tomorrow. And as one of your other commentators said, you can have all the opinion polls in the world, but as anyone who has stood for election knows, what happens tomorrow when that cross goes on that ballot paper, that is really what's going to be the result. I think we all expected Hillary Clinton to win. I certainly did. I was a Clinton supporter. And then, of course, on the day she lost, I think I expected Trump to win last time because incumbency is a very powerful factor. But Biden won. So we don't really know until the first results come through. And then, of course, it's in the hands of the lawyers. But this is a very important election for the world for the reasons that we've just heard, the possibility that the war directions of the two biggest wars at the moment, the one in the Middle East and the one in Ukraine, might change. It's very important for the United Kingdom because we claim to have the strongest relationship of any country in the world with the United States. I don't know whether that's still true in practicalities, but we always want to think we are very special. And that is why when our Prime Minister Keir Starmer went over to America for the UN meeting, he actually met with Donald Trump and went to Trump Tower and had that re-established that relationship. He wasn't able to meet with Kamala Harris, though of course he's met with President Biden on many occasions. This is very important to us because of Brexit, because we would want an American president to be able to deal with us on trade. And of course, the rhetoric that is coming out is the possibility, if one side wins, that you'll get tariffs put on goods entering the United States or increased tariffs. So it does matter. We will take this very seriously. We do watch this more than any other election. Obviously, we're fascinated with what happened in India. It doesn't have a direct input as to what happens in the UK or indeed in France in the other big election that we've had. But the American election has implications for the whole world. So it really does matter. I don't know what the result's going to be. I don't think anyone does. It's very difficult to predict what people do when they pull those curtains and they then cast their vote. And I think we're right. This is a TikTok election. This is a social media election. Mainstream media has been pushed to one side.
Yes.
We've even got big newspapers deciding that they're not going to vote. But I am very interested in what's going to happen in the House and also in the Senate. So it doesn't matter who you elect as president, unless you know who's going to control Congress, because they're the people in the end who can vote for the funds, impeach a president. You've got 435 members of the House of Representatives. You've got 100 senators, only some up for election. So that also matters a great deal. And I think we're not paying enough attention to that as opposed to who's going to be president. But I think we're always going to be fascinated by these elections. Obviously, this one more than any other.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Nagao, what's it going to boil down to? Which could sway the mandate. What's your perspective on, of course, the X factor or factors? And also, Dr. Nagao, as far as, of course, these endorsements that are coming in from celebrities, from big businessmen, what kind of effect does that have on the ordinary voter in the US?
It is not easy to expect what kind of result, but I believe that Trump will win because of the poll result. In the past, I worked as a data take of the poll company, and I know how to get the data of the poll. So that's why, from my experience, after we took the data, this company checks the poll and a little bit modified and publish it. So that's why the Trump support media, which is the Fox News or maybe social media, published Trump favor data, and CNN or other US media who love Harris published data which is favor for the Harris. So, but so in this case, the data. But in this case, so how to use effective use of these poll data is a changing point. even if the same company, even if the same type of poll, the number is changing. So in this case, we can see the Trump's favor rate, approval rate is rising now, and the Harris approval rate is declining. So view from this current trend, there's a high possibility that Trump has advantage to win the election. So of course, which factor is the most important to win the election? In this case, it is not easy to say, but the most important part is image. The life is improving, security is improving, everything, the image of the improving affects the result. So that's why the life is improving, or security situation is improving. Improving creates something, the dream. So that's why the people will vote for the improving situation. So last 4 years, situation hasn't improved. Both security, economy, both in this case. So that's why, view from this situation, there's a high possibility that the opposition can get the advantage, and this means that Trump will win, I believe.
Okay, let's go back across to our other guests. Ambassador Sajanar, let me quickly draw you back in here. As far as, of course, now India is concerned, what do you believe would be the Indian viewpoint on this US presidential polls? Who would be a better friend of India? How changed or unchanged would the US-India policy be depending on the outcome and the result of these polls?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question, Uday. And what I feel is that India finds itself in a particularly sweet spot. You know what Mr. Keith Vaz has mentioned about the importance that the results of the elections have for the United States, or for that matter, as far as Australia is concerned, it's an ally, it's an alliance partner, etc. So, for them, it's very, very significant. As far as India is concerned, I think we are in a particularly good spot because, if you look at the last 20 plus years, irrespective of whichever party has occupied the White House, relations between India and the United States have continued to grow. So I think that there is a structural convergence as far as India and the United States are concerned in terms of the convergence in their interests. On the value systems, of course, there has been a convergence in the past. Both are democracies, pluralistic societies, freedom of religion, media, etc., etc. But in recent years, particularly over the last 20 years, I think it is also the convergence of interest that has brought these countries together. And that is the binding factor. Of course, if you look at the two leaders, there will be different aspects. We've spoken about trade. We know that as far as Mr. Trump is concerned, if he were to come to power, there would be that focus on trade, which we experienced even in his first term. He had imposed penal tariffs on exports of Indian aluminium, steel, etc. He removed about $6 billion worth of our exports from the generalized system of preferences. He was particularly insistent on reduction of tariffs on export of Harley Davidson motorbikes from the United States to India. So I think those are aspects, and he's mentioned also that, India is a tariff king. Of course, we don't, and I definitely don't agree with that particular classification. But, this is the impression that he has. So I think tariff is going to be a particular element that is going to receive focus. And as far as Kamala Harris is concerned, we might get something like, some sort of a pushback on what they call, a democratic backsliding. But we have seen our panelists today, what they have, their views as far as the state of the US democracy is concerned. I think the United States itself has much to answer for, rather than sort of, pointing fingers at others. So I think that is a dialogue that, if it comes up, it will happen on the sidelines. The point I want to make is that the main body of the partnership between India and the United States, whether it is in the area of defense, it is in the area of transfer of technology, semiconductors, you know what we've been talking about, G414 engines, on Indo-Pacific, on the Quad, on pushback against the expansionist policies of China, etc. I think those are elements that are going to stay. Last point that because there are most of
Yes.
the panelists from
Yes.
are out of India. The last
Yes.
point that I would like to make here is, many people seem to think that it is the glue of China. Both the countries have problems with China, that brings them together. China might be one element. It is not the whole picture.
Okay.
The whole picture is very, very different. China is one of them, and that brings us. But I think, as I mentioned,
Let me quickly take that to
technology.
Joyita Basu as well on the Indian perspective on the US elections. Who would be a better friend for India in the White House, Joyita? Also, on the very important question about the new occupant of the White House's position on the conflict as well. Is that likely to change, be it, of course, the Gaza conflict or the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
First of all, Uday, as Indians, or in fact, in this particular case, the Indian diplomatic establishment, Indian government cannot afford to say that, this candidate is better than that. I mean, whoever is winning, whoever will win, we have to deal with that person. At the same time, what we have to remember is that when we look at how the US administration functions, many of their departments, particularly State Department in particular, works in silos. So, a lot of this, I would say, I am going to call it nonsense that is coming from the US about India's democratic backsliding, which is an utter lie. That is coming primarily from the kind of people that are there in the State Department. If you look at, even for that matter, the Biden's agreement, you remember that January 2023, that critical technology, that ISET agreement that happened and all. So, the pushback for that was coming from State Department, which did not want it to be implemented. Defense Department wanted it to be implemented. So, finally, ultimately what happened, that National Security Council at the level of NSA and all, at the level of the president, it was sorted out. So, you see, the perception here is that, the belief here is that, irrespective of whatever these departments, they try to enforce their own agenda on US government policy. If you have the president's core team with you, then you can ignore the rest of them. Now, the problem is that, you see, what sort of a core team, we have a fairly good idea of how Trump's team will be. What sort of a team is Harris going to bring in? You see, this is because there is a talk that Harris is too left for anybody's comfort, too liberal, which is another name for Marxist actually. So, what sort of a team is she bringing in? So, you see, those things will come into the play at that time, but I am certain our diplomats are, I would say, I mean, they know how to maneuver these waters and they will maneuver it. So, now this comes to the, when you are talking about that part. So, we have to handle whatever the situation, we have to handle it. Now, you are talking about the war part. You see what is going to happen. Well, I do not know whether Donald Trump can end the Russia-Ukraine war, which is going to be 3 years in February, inside 24 hours. I have my doubts about it, but yes, definitely what is going to happen is that he is going to cut off the funding Ukraine, because there is a strong, and let us not forget, one of the things that is giving Trump a push, that is, there is a belief that he is a no war president. All right, and there is a belief that Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, they are going, they want America pushed into war, basically of the defense established, whatever be the reasons. So, there is this belief that Trump is a no war president, and that is really working in his favor. Whether it is right or wrong, we do not know as yet. Now, so I really do not know whether he can stop the war inside 24 hours. As for the Israel-Gaza, Israel-Hamas and Israel-Iran, that is very interesting, because you see, there is a distinct feeling in Israel, and a lot of people I have been talking to. The thing is that they want Trump, because you see, there is a strong feeling. What is happening? There is just a story that has come out, that the Biden-Harris administration, they are posing hindrances, they are erecting hindrances for supplying certain defense stuff to material, I would say, to Israel. apparently there is a shortfall of bullets, and that supply, I mean whatever they were getting from the US and all. So, Biden and Harris, they have been working actively, Israelis say, to hobble Israel. Okay, I mean overall of course they have to be, you know, they have sent in their B-52 bombers,
Yes.
and all these things, but there is apparently, I mean that is what, as I said, the Israelis say they are removing sanctions on Iran, which is basically helping funding Iran, which ultimately will go into using them for their proxies against Israel, the 7 proxies that they have. So, you see, now that is a very tricky thing. Now, if Trump comes in, there is going to be full on support for Israel. I think there will be lots of sanctions on Iran, but I am not so certain which way Kamala will go, because if you remember, Kamala Harris walked out of Netanyahu's speech, then they have been pushing back on the Rafah, and the Israelis are extremely upset about
Yes.
it.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Let me quickly go back across to Ben Harris on, of course, you know, since Ben, you have spent time in Moscow. What do you believe the new US occupant of the White House, or this presidential election result, what bearing is it going to have on the US's position vis-a-vis the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and also the Gaza war and the war, of course, now in the Middle East?
Well, as for Ukraine, as I said before, that Trump has said he'll end the war straight away, and we've been seeing a growing amount of Ukraine fatigue, that the support that the States is giving, in particular to Ukraine, has been dwindling, that funding ran out completely in January and left this catastrophic hole in Ukraine's air defense when they ran out of Patriots. And Russia has destroyed half the heating system in the meantime. Finally, in April, there was a $61 billion package passed by Congress in order to stop basically Ukraine being defeated. Trouble is that money is still not coming. Zelensky said just last week that he's received only 10% of the money that was promised in April, $6 billion. And that's simply not enough. I mean, Ukraine is running a deficit of $3.5 billion a month. And if they don't get any more money, then they're going to have to capitulate. As for Harris, she's indicated, she hasn't been very concrete, but she's indicated basically that she's going to continue Biden's program with supporting Ukraine and supplying it with arms and money. However, again, as I say, the Ukraine fatigue is such that I think under Harris that she will also draw back and wind down the amount of support, because already the load has shifted to Europe, who's increasingly picking up both the financial and the military strain. In particular, the States is no longer sending weapons from its stockpiles, in particular the air defense missiles. And these are increasingly coming from Europe. And the plan now, I think, and Harris will definitely push this, is rather than giving Ukraine weapons from NATO stockpiles, they're going to build factories that Ukraine can manufacture its own. But the problem with that is time. I mean, these factories will take at least 1 or 2 years to come online, and Ukraine is on the front line. It's in defeat. So I'm not sure they have that much time. So I think the outlook for the Ukraine war is pretty bleak. I think they can struggle on. Under Harris, it'll be much easier for maybe another year, but they are at the moment in retreat and facing defeat. And there's been talk of ceasefire deals again. How we get from here to there is going to be very difficult. But as I say, I think either of the presidents, be it Harris, be it Trump, will continue this withdrawal, this pullback. As for the Middle East, I'm much less qualified to comment on that. But my understanding of it is that Israel has the US's full support, full backing, as much money, as much arms as it wants, and it will continue to get that. However, the White House is obviously very unhappy and wants to avoid a wider war, regional war at all costs, in particular taking out Iranian oil refineries and oil production, because that would cause international energy markets to spike, oil prices to spike. And I think all said and done, regardless of the security commitments, I think the number one concern of the White House is to keep a cap on oil prices. And so they will work very hard to rein in Netanyahu, or at least limit him, and so that he doesn't cause any damage to the energy infrastructure
Yes.
in the region. That's their main priority.
Okay. Keithvaz, quickly coming to you as well on this point of, what bearing do you believe also, the positions on the war will have on the voter in the United States of America, given the, the kind of extent of the conflicts and also, of course, the media headlines that the conflicts have generated?
For the elector, the issue is what's happening to your taxpayers' money. And this is where Trump has been able to get right through to the elector. Why are we spending taxpayers' money on supporting another country? And this is something that really was important in the UK elections, and I think in the French elections before that. The fact is, how much can the taxpayer bear of this expenditure in order to support a cause? And that is where I think that is getting through to the electorate all over the world. I think we're living in a time of incredible poverty. Cost of living crisis is affecting every country in the world. And ordinary people, and they are the people who vote, they have the chance to put this right in an election. So obviously, we want to, I don't think any of us on this program want to continue with wars for the sake of wars or for causes that are not supported. In the end, these countries will have to go and rebuild Ukraine. When Ukraine is destroyed after this war, as it will be, because it's being pummeled every day, somebody will have to go in and spend the money, the dollars, in order to make sure it's rebuilt. So it's a cycle that will continue to go on and on and on. I think the Middle East is more complicated because I think the two parties are very similar in their approach. They're both supportive of Israel. I don't think that there will be much change. I think Trump has overcome his upset with Netanyahu, that Netanyahu congratulated Biden after the last election before all the legal proceedings were completed. I don't think American politicians can do anything but support Israel because of the very, very strong lobby and the very strong relationship they have with it. But I think Ukraine is different. And of course, as we know, Trump has form on this. So that will get through to the electorate. Do they want to have that money invested in Detroit, or do they want to spend it in Kyiv? These are the issues, I think, that will ultimately influence the way in which this election occurs. But whoever comes in, big foreign policy implications. I think relations with Russia will improve if Trump gets in. I think relations with China will get worse. I think that in terms of India, since this was raised by the ambassador, I think probably Modi gets on better with Trump than he does with any other American leader. They certainly seem to gel. They're both populist, charismatic leaders. And, I think they've got this synergy. Certainly, I wasn't at the meetings, but from what I saw, when they both visited their respective countries, there was something going on there that I think will continue.
Okay,
but I think that these are big issues as far as war and peace is concerned.
Point taken. Charles Thompson, what about the Australian perspective? What is Australia looking at? How is Australia looking at this US election? Who would be a better friend for Australia? What impact will this have on groupings like the Quad? And also, what about the China perspective as well?
Wow. Well, it depends which side of politics you're on to answer that question. So what I find fascinating too is over many years, if we went back many years ago, on the left side of politics, the migrants communities were very much involved with their politicians and everything. But on the right side of politics, it wasn't there. But now, if you're talking present day, whether it's Australia or the United States, there's many very highly educated, very wealthy Indians who are now quietly behind the scenes in the Republicans and in the Conservatives in Australia. And the thing that I hear time and time again from my Indian friends in Australia is the one thing that attracts them to Trump is the idea that he's not for wars. And this is the big ticket item that I hear from them. My only request to India would be get your embassies, get your consulates to use more soft power and get out there and do more soft power with your culture, because there is, whether it's the United States or whether it's Australia, there's a huge, very wealthy, highly educated Indian community who want to connect both countries.
All right. Let's leave it at that. Appreciate. Okay, I'll give the last word to Dr. Satoru Nagawa. I have just a couple of minutes left. So, Dr. Nagawa, I'm going to give you the last word on, of course, your way forward for the US vis-a-vis their foreign policy. What changes will happen depending on which way this election goes. And also, I'd like you to address the China question. How is China viewing this election? Who would be a more difficult person to deal with for China, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump?
Okay, so we should remember what happened last 4 years. The United States failed to deter the war initiated by Russia or initiated by other rivals against the United States. And because of this, U.S. allies, including Israel or other countries, cannot rely on the United States. So that's why the people start to talk about the multipolar world instead of the Pax Americana. So United States need to recover the image of the strong United States. So under the same government, it is not an easy task, I believe. So completely change is needed. In this case, which one has the advantage? I believe the Republican has the advantage because the current government is not Republican. That is my analysis in short. Thank you.
Yes, okay. Yes, Joyita wants to quickly comment.
I want to make a quick point. You know, one of the biggest drawbacks of Harris is that she was part of the administration for 4 years. And whatever Joe Biden's problems were,
Yes.
whatever misgovernance or good actually the problem is the misgovernance part is sticking with her.
Okay.
So that could also be a deciding factor.
Okay. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.